The opening two psukim of Parshas Tetzaveh are actually repeated by the Torah in the book of Vayikra in Parshas Emor. And I just wanted to create a contrast for you. And you tell me if you can note some of the differences. I'm sort of not leaving that much work up to you because I've underlined some of the differences, but you see I have them side by side, and I just want you to notice it's almost uncanny that it's almost a verbatim repeat, which normally you don't see in the Torah for a mitzvah, that the Torah should repeat it almost verbatim, especially in two completely disparate places in the Torah. In this week's Parsha, in Perek Chaf Zayin, Pasuk Chaf and Chaf Aleph, it says, Ve'ata Tetzaveh es b'nei Yisrael. You, who's God speaking to? Moshe. Even though Moshe is not mentioned by name. As a matter of fact, this is the only Parsha of mitzvahs where Moshe's name is not mentioned. And Chazal tell us it's because Moshe Rabbeinu in next week's Parsha, in Parshas Kitisa, said, Mecheni na misifrecha asher kasavta. God, erase me from your book if you're going to punish the Jewish people. So even though God did not punish and destroy the Jewish people, God still felt that he had to honor Moshe's request of erasing him from his book. So according to tradition, that's why there's one Parsha where Moshe's name is not mentioned at all, and that's Parshas Tetzaveh. That there's no mention of Moshe, even when normally we would expect the Torah to start with Vayidaber Hashem el Moshe lemor. Here it just starts with Ve'ata Tetzaveh. You, Moshe, command the Jewish people, and they shall take for you, or take to you, pure olive oil that has been beaten for illumination, in order to be able to create an eternal light in the holy place, which is what is being contextualized here, which is for the Mishkan. If you notice, let's now go over to Pasuk Aleph and Beis in Vayikra Perek Chaf Dalet in Parshas Emor. Here you do find Vayidaber Hashem el Moshe lemor, and here it's, instead of Ve'ata Tetzaveh, it's Tzav es b'nei Yisrael. Commands the Jewish people. V'yikchu elecha shemen zayizach kasis la'ma'or laha'alos ner tamid. And they shall, exactly the same words, they shall take for you shemen zayizach, pure olive oil, beaten for illumination, to create an eternal light. Now let's take a look at the next pasuk in each place. Pasuk Chaf Aleph in column 1 is Ba'ohel mo'ed michutz la'paroches asher al ha'edus. In the tent of meeting, outside the curtain, which is over the testimony. Now what do we mean by the testimony? Anyone know what that means? The Aron. The Aron Kodesh is known as the Aron Ha'edus, the Ark of the Testimony. So therefore, in the covered tent, which is the Mishkan, just outside the curtain, which is covering or separating from the Ark, Ya'aroch oso Aharon uvanav me'erev ad boker lifnei Hashem. Aharon and his sons shall organize this light from evening until morning in front of God. Chukas olam ledorosam, it shall be an eternal statute for all generations. Me'es b'nei Yisrael, from the Jewish people, meaning that this oil has to be produced by the Jewish people. Now let's take a look at column B and Pasuk Gimel from Parshas Emor. Michutz lefaroches ha'edus ba'ohel mo'ed. Outside the curtain, which separates from the Edus, in the tent of meeting, Ya'aroch oso Aharon me'erev ad boker lifnei Hashem tamid, chukas olam lidorosechem. You see a number of differences, but notice that at the very beginning, what is the most glaring difference over here? What's the most glaring difference between these two psukim that you can find out? Let's see, put on your thinking caps. Tell me the most glaring difference.
The first two things are switched.
Thank you. They're out of order. This order is completely switched. The first pasuk in our parsha says, in the tent of meeting, outside on the outside part of the curtain, which separates from the ark. And in Parshas Emor, it says, Michutz la parochet, outside of the curtain that separates from the ark that is in the Ohel Moed. Why? Why does the Torah change the order? It's in the Ohel Moed, I know that. It's going to be situated, the light that you're going to light. By the way, what light are we lighting here? What candles are we lighting? Menorah. We're lighting the menorah, right? The Torah hasn't identified the menorah here in either section at this point, but we clearly know the menorah was situated in the Mishkan, in front of the paroches, in front of the curtain that separated between us and the ark, which was in the Holy of Holies, right? But why does the Torah call it in our Parsha, it'll be situated in the tent of meeting, just outside the paroches? And in Parshas Emor it says, oh, it's just outside the paroches in the tent of meeting.
Well, maybe because it tells you there where, by that way, where everything should be. No?
I don't understand what you're saying. I mean, they're both identifying where it is, right? It's just, one is saying it's in the tent of meeting and just outside the paroches, and the other one says it's just outside the paroches that's in the tent of meeting. It's the same thing, just the reversed order. Another is that the word tamid is used in Parshas Emor, where it doesn't say the word tamid here. Another difference is that in our Parsha it says me'es b'nei Yisrael, from the Jewish people a second time. And in Parshas Emor it just says chukas olam l'dorosechem. It'll be an eternal statute for your generations, not from me'es b'nei Yisrael. And then finally, there's a fourth pasuk in Parshas Emor that we don't have at all in Parshas Tetzave, which is Al HaMenorah HaTehorah Ya'aroches HaNeiros Lifnei Hashem Tamid. Organize these candles, or these lights, on top of the menorah that is in front of Hashem constantly. And nowhere is that mentioned over here. Now, it's true, in last week's Parsha, we talked about the construction of the menorah, but in this week's Parsha, there's no mention of the menorah in the context of the lights. So that also has to be explained. Yes?
It's also a different text, L'dorotam and L'dorotechem.
L'dorotam means for their generations, L'dorotechem means for your generations. Yeah. You're right.
Also.
Right. So in other words, in Parshat Shemot, and also I think that's the difference between why it says Vayidaber Hashem al Moshe Lemor, really God is speaking in first person directly to the Jewish people, because he's saying verbatim, this is what you shall say to the Jewish people. And when Moshe is speaking to the Jewish people, we're imagining Moshe saying, this shall be for all your generations. And when God is speaking to Moshe in our Parsha, he's saying, tell them this is what they're supposed to do for all of their generations. Yes?
Also it says here Aaron Ubanav, and there it says only Aaron.
Ah, very good. Very good. That's another important difference. It doesn't say Aaron Uvanav over there. Now, we're not going to be able to answer all of the questions, but I want to tell you thematically what comes to mind when I look at these two different sections, and I think sort of as a beginning of helping us to be able to understand this. First of all, the Malbim tells us that anytime you have the language of tzav, command, there are a lot of mitzvahs that are not prefaced by the word Tzavis b'nei Yisrael, command the Jewish people. Or Be'ata Tetzaveh, you shall command the Jewish people. What is the language of tzav? So the Malbim tells us that whenever we find the word tzav, it could be one of three reasons why the word tzav is used. And that's on the bottom. You see, the Malbim says this in Parshas Tzav. He says, Im yirtzeh litzayin hazrizut, if there's a desire to emphasize alacrity in performance, meaning that there may be a reason that you may not want to do this so meticulously, and so the word tzav says, no guys, be careful with this. That's really what tzav is. You got to really be careful with this. This is important because it takes precision in performance, and if you're lazy, you won't get it right, which is really when you manufacture olive oil, you got to be very careful. This is not just any olive oil, this is extra virgin olive oil. You got to be very, very careful with it. Number two, im yirtzeh l'tzayin hatekifut. If the command is telling you, do this right away, get this, put this on the top of your to-do list. This needs to be done now. That's also when you find the language of tzav. And the third time you find the language of tzav is im yirtzeh l'tzayin sheyeh mitzvah noheget tamid kemo tzavaot ha'avot lebanim. If this is something that is a perpetual obligation, this is something that I want you always to do. Don't. It's like when your mother says clean your room. That's a tzav mitzvah, because it's not just a one-time commandment, right? Clean your room today, and that doesn't just mean today. It means tomorrow, and for all perpetuity, I want you to clean your room, right? That's what tzav. That's what a tzav commandment is all about. So, when you find the word tzav, ve'ata tetzaveh, you Moshe command, or the word tzavis b'nei Yisrael, we clearly are dealing with a mitzvah that certainly has a special kind of significance. Now, thematically, if we're going to be looking at the difference between Sefer Shemos and Sefer Vayikra, I think that it's very important for us to distinguish. We find a whole set of mitzvahs about constructing the Mishkan and preparing the Kohanim for service in the book of Exodus. And we also find the entire sacrificial service that's done in the Mishkan in the book of Leviticus, in the book of Vayikra. Why are they divided into two different books? One of the ways of explaining that divide between what's going on in Shemos and what's going on in Vayikra is that Shemos is all about vesting the Jewish people with requisite greatness that they need in order to realize that they are the people who are the chosen ones, who are in charge of bringing God into this world. It is a special kind of reinforcement that we find throughout Sefer Shemos. I mean, when you think about it, historically it's so necessary because the Jews in Sefer Shemos have just come out of Egypt. They have been trampled on and stepped on and made to feel that they are the lowest of the low in humanity. And so Sefer Shemos is reminding us all, you're royalty. You were the diamond in the rough. You were the pauper boy who was really the prince all along. And the world mistreated you, the world hated you, the world stepped on you, but they only did it because they knew how special you were. And now it's time for you to rise to your destiny and to become the people of God. And therefore, in that context, because after all, look at what mitzvah comes immediately after the mitzvah to manufacture the olive oil. The mitzvah of the priestly garments. And what is the function of the priestly garments? Lechavod u'letifaret, for glory and for beauty. Because the Kohen Gadol is supposed to represent the majesty of the Jewish people. To the nation, when they look at him, they say, Mar e Kohen. They say, look at this majestic human being. This is what the ultimate Jew is supposed to represent. The servant of God, but at the same time, the chosen one of God. And in that light, the purpose of the olive oil is to create that sense of pride within the Jewish people to realize, look who we are, that we have the opportunity to illuminate the world. And symbolically, we remind ourselves of this whenever we light a light inside the tabernacle, inside the temple, inside the Mishkan. That's what the purpose of the olive oil is, to provide, to show that we are the light unto the nations, that we are supposed to be able to illuminate the world spiritually because of our inherent greatness. Now, if you contrast that with the Sefer Vayikra, with the book of Leviticus, you discover that Sefer Vayikra has a different tone to it. Sefer Vayikra is no longer there to remind the Jewish people of their inherent greatness. It is more of a placement of responsibility upon us. Now that we've established in the book of Exodus who you are, now you got to realize with great power comes great responsibility. And so here's your responsibility, Chevra. You are charged with creating an environment within your midst where God is going to feel welcome. You've got to generate the requisite Kedusha. And that's a heavy responsibility. That's a great responsibility, and it's no longer talking about privilege. We're talking about responsibility in Sefer Vayikra. So Shemos is all about privilege and greatness and reminding ourselves who we are, the chosen people. And Vayikra is, now get to work and make sure you keep this world holy, your community holy, so that God will feel welcome. And that's why you have Parshas Kedoshim and all of the other mitzvahs that remind us about how to keep our camp holy. But it's also about the sacrificial service, which is all about appeasing Hashem and making sure that He is happy with the work that we do, serving Him, devoting ourselves to Him, and atoning for the sins that we've committed in our midst, so that God will always feel welcome in this holy environment. So I think that if you look at these two sections in that light, we might be able to see a bit of an unfolding of that mystery as to why there's slight differences between these two, and why the mitzvahs have to be repeated. The mitzvah of creating a light for the world is a source of great pride for the Jewish people, and that's why it appears in this section in Sefer Shemos. But in order for the Jewish people to feel that sense of connection to God and feel that sense of privilege and chosenness, Hashem says to Moshe, it's ve'ata Tetzaveh. Moshe, this is not something that I want you to relegate to other people to teach the Jewish people. You've got to make sure that they hear it directly from you. Because in order for them to realize their greatness, they have to associate with you, the ultimate servant of God, the mouthpiece of Hashem, so that they hear it from you directly and that you remind them of their greatness. That's why ve'ata Tetzaveh. And that's also why the order in the following pasuk is reversed. The order in the following pasuk is reversed is because the emphasis here is not on creating safeguards and protecting a holy environment. The emphasis here is the Jewish people are an amazing chosen people. So we can understand where the emphasis on Ohel Moed. Look, this is where you're going to be lighting the light, in the place where God meets man. That's the important part. And then the part which identifies that you have to create protective boundaries between yourself and God to maintain proper protocol is the secondary issue, which is michutz leparoches asher al ha'edus. Oh, by the way, make sure that you never invade the Holy of Holies when in your efforts to light that light. But that's a secondary issue. The primary issue is to extol the greatness of the Jewish people, that it's in the Ohel Moed, the tent of meeting with God. That's where you're going to light that light, because look who you are. You're the chosen people. Now, when we get to Vayikra, the order is reversed because it's a different emphasis. The book of Vayikra is create holy spaces and show proper reverence and create protective boundaries between yourself and Hashem so that He always feels welcome, and atone and all those other things. So then make sure you don't trespass God's space. Michutz leparoches ha'edus. It's got to first make sure that you got it situated in the right place, that you're not going in too far. It's got to be outside that curtain, the dividing curtain. And then secondarily, it's in the Ohel Moed, it's in the place of meeting. It's a different emphasis now. It's no longer about the privilege and greatness of the Jewish people. It's about the great responsibility that you have to maintain holiness by creating holy spaces and proper safeguards and atoning factors and things like that within your community. And that's why in Parshas Tetzaveh, the emphasis is Me'es B'nei Yisrael. This has to be manufactured by the Jewish people, because every single Jew has to realize that they are spreading this light. And in Sefer Vayikra, that emphasis is not repeated. The emphasis in Sefer Vayikra is on protocol, on how you properly serve Hashem. And that's why the Torah makes a point of saying that it has to be al ha-menorah ha-tehorah. It has to be done on the holy menorah, with confined and constrained and defined and specific kinds of protocol and mitzvahs. In Sefer Shemos, if we're talking about the great ideal of the Jewish people spreading a light to the world because we're the chosen people, the fact that we're lighting it on a little menorah in the temple almost detracts from that idea. Because we want to idealize the idea that we're the spreaders of spiritual greatness and light to the world. So we're not going to talk about the menorah here in Sefer Shemos. So I think that's the beginning of perhaps a definition, and you see that it goes further. When we get to the book of Bamidbar, where there's also a mention of lighting the menorah, there in Parshas Bahaloscha, it's almost incidental that you're spreading the light. It's bahalosches haneros amul pnei hamenorah ya'iru shivas neros. When you spread that light, God says in Parshas Baloscha, make sure you do it on the menorah, and then Svayasu kein Aharon amul pnei hamenorah he'ela neroseha. And here the whole emphasis is on the protocol, and that it was done by Aharon. And the reason is because in Sefer Bamidbar, there's an even greater emphasis on the structuring of the camp of Israel. There the Meforshim point out that there's a whole series of mitzvos that are done to properly structure the hierarchy of holiness within the camp itself. And that's why the Torah has to go into great detail in talking about how and where and who is supposed to do the mitzvah in Sefer Bamidbar. But the primary focus of our distinction is from Sefer Shemos to Sefer Vayikra. I think that whenever we, and I think it's from a pedagogical standpoint, this is a very valuable exercise as well. Whenever you want to educate a child, you first have to remind the child of their inherent greatness before you place that mantle of responsibility upon them. So first reinforce the fact that you are an amazing kid. You're an amazing human being. You have potentials and opportunities open to you because of your inherent greatness, and you're going to spread light throughout the world because of the great powers that you have. And then, now that we've talked about that, okay, clean up your room. Okay. Make sure that you spread the light to your own room and clean it up. Right? So it has to be diffused, or it has to be spread out to the student in that way. First Sefer Shemos and then Sefer Vayikra. Okay? Have a wonderful day, everybody. And thanks for coming on such a snowy day.